Well, hey, everyone. Welcome back to Worldviews in Conflict as we continue to explore world issues, put them in the context of the biblical prophecies. And today we pick it up in a day when things are really popping in the Middle East. Israel has decided they've had enough of Hamas. The negotiations have fallen flat, and they're hitting right now Hamas with a lot of firepower, trying to take out and really be successful in their goal to eliminate the threat to the south from Gaza and the Hamas people. And so that makes it very timely for us, and we're going to be discussing today the depths of depravity that the human beings can do, the depth of depravity that has happened in Hamas. What has that looked like? What does that look like biblically? And also, where do we go from here? Where will things probably move? So we'll be trying to kind of get ourselves centered in on a biblical picture of where we are and where things are going. And today I'm going to be using an interview. It's a dialogue back and forth with Pastor Tom Hughes and John Haller, who pick it up about 21 minutes into their dialogue with a discussion of the depths of depravity of the Hamas people. I'll be primarily there, and then we will look at Melanie Phillips. She has some very powerful words to say about the depravity of the October 7th attacks and what that has revealed. And we'll also be trying to put this in the context of where we are globally. How does this look globally? What's going to probably happen tomorrow after Israel really hits Hamas very, very hard? And Hamas is already putting out detailed notes of people killed. And they, of course, this is their big propaganda message. And then tomorrow, the college campuses, no doubt, will be on fire. Protests around the world are going to occur. And so we'll be kind of making some comments as we go upon that situation. And so I want to begin, and I'm going to be breaking up this dialogue into pretty small chunks. So we're going to be looking at just about a couple minutes of dialogue between Pastor Tom Hughes and John Haller on the depths of depravity, where we are with Hamas, and what that has looked like. So here we go.
Because I read the story over the weekend. This is just, the evil of Hamas is just so far off the scale. So you've been down to the Gaza border. I was there and just 2 years ago, before the war, before the invasion on October 7th. And, they're very nice people. We went to several kibbutzim, and we had lunch and we had dinner, and we had a lady came and talked. I've seen her on TV since, that lived at Miram. And what you learn is when they live in a commune, so they're sort of like, we would call them hippies. They're very nice people. They're peaceniks. They think, you can just love your neighbor and you're not going to have any problems. And then that was shattered. And they had 18,000 people a day coming over from Gaza to work in Israel before October 7th. And they even talked about how a group of these Palestinians met the leadership at Nir Oz, one of the most devastated of the kibbutzim in the October 7th invasion. It wasn't a terror attack, it was an invasion by a foreign army. And they met. And it was 2 weeks later, the people who met with these peace-loving people at the kibbutz were the ones that came in and killed them and kidnapped them. So it was a complete head fake by the Hamas people.
Yeah, I want to pause it right there. A complete head fake by the Hamas people. As we think about treachery and deceit, I can't think of a better example than working with people, befriending them, being in their homes, and then they mark out targets as they go in. And then they meet with them, they share festival camaraderie. You could even say a warped fellowship. And then they attack them, murder them, kill them, rape them, take them hostage. These are people they knew, that they worked with. I can't think of a better example of depravity than that whole situation that led up to October 7th. I want to complement this with a short section by Melanie Phillips, where she just does an excellent job. Takes a minute and a half to talk about the evil of October 7th, as well as the response on the part of the world, the sort of insanity of the rest of the world. So here we go.
October 7 happened, and suddenly you have a situation in which the people that the liberal progressive has supported as being oppressed, and everything they do is a legitimate defense or resistance against oppression, suddenly we can see that those people have turned into the most bloodthirsty savages that could ever be imagined. Not just people who kill, but who slaughter in a sadistic, barbaric, debauched and depraved fashion that people can't imagine ever happening. They have slaughtered, raped, beheaded, tortured, burned alive babies, children, women, elderly men, and others. And as a result, the liberal progressives faced with this nightmare situation in which the people that they have supported as being oppressed are good people because they're victims are these savages. And the people they have represented as oppressors are the victims. They can't have that. Because if they have that, if they admit that that is the case, then their entire worldview is shattered, because the people, the cause they have supported as representing goodness is shown to be evil. And what does that make them?
That's an incredibly powerful statement. And I think it's a very deep insight into the liberal, progressive mind that no doubt will be marching on campuses tomorrow in protest of Israel, hitting them hard, hitting Hamas hard, as they are right now. If you're not aware of that, by the time this video comes out, you probably will be. And there will be nightmare scenes, there will be death counts. And the progressive left, which has identified Hamas as a victim, now is faced with a very great dilemma. What do we do when these people that we call the innocent victims, we've been on their side, they go out and murder and rape and rampage? What do we do now? Well, their only choice is to continue on and identify Hamas and the Palestinians really as just victims, and their rage is understandable. And so now when Israel hits them and hits them hard, the gauntlet's going to come down on Israel. Sure enough, good and evil are turned upside down on the progressive left. It reminds me of Revelation chapter 17, the woman who rides the beast and sits on many waters. And the kings and rulers of the world do business with the woman whose hands are full of blood. And this woman, this globalist entity that sits on many waters, is not the beast. When you go down a little lower in Revelation chapter 17, the beast and his empire turn on the woman. These are two different entities. And I think we can kind of see this emerging right now as we look at events in the Middle East, and we see an emerging beast empire all around Israel. And we also see a globalist empire, the woman, and they will be coming hard against Israel. Ultimately, this will lead to Armageddon in Revelation chapter 16, and then with the return of Christ in chapter 19. The stage is being fully set for these events, evil is fully on display. And it's interesting right now that for actually a few years now, the place on planet Earth that has the greatest revival and growth of the Christian church are the places of the greatest darkness, which is Iran, Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria. The underground church in these areas, if they're not completely wiped out, tremendously persecuted, but they've seen evil, they've experienced it, they had a taste of it, and the gospel has looked pretty good to them. And I believe that's what's going to come in the coming days. I want to put a bright note out there. The glory of the gospel is going to shine very, very bright as this darkness is allowed by the Lord to take a charge and do what he can in the Middle East. And I believe we're very, very close to all these events being right upon us. And in fact, I think it can be argued that we're in it. But I don't want to make that case right now. I just tell people, hey, watch for a temple and temple sacrifices. When you see that, there's confirmation. We know where we are. So I want to go back now to Heller in a couple minutes, and we have some comments coming up, very strong comments by Donald Trump saying we're going to wipe out Gaza. And it really drives me to 1 Samuel 15, where Samuel, the prophet Samuel, tells Saul, wipe out Amalek. And so then, as we watch this, think about the evil in Gaza and think about the human hearts. These folks have been raised from childhood to hate Israel, and really they're enemies of God. It's a demonic culture. And I'm going to ask the question, is this Amalek in our generation? Here we go.
And I mentioned this to you last week. So here we have the President of the United States come out and say, we're just gonna wipe out Gaza. We're just gonna wipe it out. And a week ago, and it's always interesting how the scripture portions that are read in Jewish synagogues and temples, they have the same portion. And so every synagogue will be on the same portion. It's like a lectionary book. And a week ago, the Haftorah portion was 1 Samuel 15. And that was Samuel telling the King Saul from the tribe of Benjamin, go wipe out the Amalekites, Amalek. And Amalek was the grandson of Esau after he married into the line of Ishmael. And the command was to wipe them out, and he didn't. And it was like utterly destroy them, every man, woman, and child. And so we have this thing in Gaza, which is like a recapitulation of Amalek, of the Amalekites, because they're trained from the ground up in school to do this. And how do you change that? So there's all these people running around. Okay, we can make peace. We can come into some kind of agreement with them, and we can retrain them. And I'm sort of like, I'm looking at this, I'm looking at what's happening in Syria. I'll talk about that in just a moment. But they don't change. How do you change them? And so is the admonition to go about the Amalek, to go after and utterly destroy the Amalekites, is this Amalek in our generation? And now we have...
I'm going to pause it right there with that question. Is this Amalek in our generation? Has the hearts of the Hamas people, the Palestinians people, been so darkened that you could really call them Amalek, who are their forefathers throughout history? And in 1 Samuel 15, Saul is told to wipe them out, men, women, children, animals, and he fails to do it. And there's going to be consequences for that. And Israel is faced with this dilemma right now. They have their own people are captive in Gaza, and they have worked hard to get them out. So they may get one person out that's been captive, and then the demonic Hamas gets hundreds. So it was a terrible deal. But Israel, because they prize and value life, was willing to make that deal, and they worked as hard as they could to get as many out. And now they've come to the end of the rope, and today they're hitting Gaza, Hamas, hard. And the protests are going to be coming, so be ready for that. Be ready for that. Think about it in terms of 1 Samuel 15. You could think about it in terms of Genesis 15, I believe it's verse 11, where Abraham is told, you're going to go into the promised land, but not until the fullness of the sin of the Amorites is complete. It will progress, and it will get to a point where Joshua is going to be told to go in, and we'll have the Joshua wars in the land of Canaan, which a lot of people really struggle with. They're horrific, and they wipe out whole areas, men, women, children. Are these being repeated today? Are we in situations similar to that? Let's continue on. I want to go to the next section where we're going to be dealing with Netanyahu and his choices. And the question is Netanyahu doing the right thing? Has he been acting powerfully enough? And this is in the context of actually in the Bible readings in Israel, and they're all across the board, they read the same thing. They've been reading about Samuel and Saul. They've been reading about Haman at the Feast of Purim. And the Israelite response to Haman, whose goal was to destroy every man, woman, and child in Israel. And is there a little bit of relevance here? And if you're advising Netanyahu, what do you tell him? Let's hear from John.
A prime minister of Israel, who is of the tribe of Benjamin, they say, and is he ignoring what Samuel told King Saul to do? And by the way, it didn't work out very well for King Saul. And then we just had this past week, we had Purim, which was the story of where another Amalekite, Haman, tried to wipe out all of the Jews in the Persian Empire. And that's sort of relevant to what's going on too. So it's sort of like this cycle, all of this stuff.
And just pause right there with that question about the relevance. Prophecy is pattern. I've heard that said, and I believe that's true. And for Old Testament books to get into the canon, they had to have elements of prophecy to get in there. And all these situations that you read about in the Old Testament, are they types of where we are now? And are we experiencing a reality right on the ground of prophetic events opening up right before us with the same dynamics of evil, the seed of the woman crushing the head of the serpent ultimately? Is this that ageless battle between the seed of the woman and the seed of the serpent? I truly believe it is. And the biblical picture is that we wrestle not with flesh and blood, but our wrestling is spiritual in the heavenly realms. And there are demonic hosts at work. And God is allowing these to do their thing, and he's testing hearts through that. And ultimately, Israel is going to become one of the great lightning rods to test hearts. And God is going to use Israel all the way to the end. And you can see that in Joel chapter 3, verse 2. You can see it in Psalm 2, Psalm 110. Israel is that lightning rod. They are God's people. They represent God himself on the earth. And attitudes and stances right now towards Israel reveal the human heart. So that's just a powerful thing to think about. And what advice would you have for Netanyahu? He has such a difficult job. They want those captives out, and they want Hamas destroyed. And he's been balancing that. And I think the balancing act might be about over. I think Israel and Israeli leaders are going to act, and they're going to act decisively. If you're in Iran right now and you're around the nukes, I would suggest you get out. I think you are next. Israel and President Trump are saying, Iran, we hold you responsible for all these events. They've been hitting hard now, and with President Trump in the office here, he does have their back. Will the backing of President Trump be enough? No. Prophetically, world events are going to move, and they're going to move forward. They will move, despite our best efforts. But I would have to say this. President Trump is being used by God. When he turned his head and avoided the assassination, God's hand was on him. God is going to use him, I believe, in the coming 8 days. And the darker it gets, the crazier it gets, economic crashing, wars, and whatnot. I want a strong leader at the helm. I want the guy who turned his head and came up and said, fight, fight, fight. That's the guy I want. I'm going to move on now, so this little video doesn't take too long, but we're going to move now into some of the things we've already been suggesting. Are we seeing a pattern emerging? So here we go.
That we read about in Scripture is being recapitulated in the world that we live in today. And I've said this many times, the prophetic Scriptures, when they're fulfilled, will unfold in a real world that people live in. And now we have the problem with a Islamist regime in Syria.
Now we've kind of turned the corner a little bit in our discussion towards a situation in Syria that is just opening up. And it's been savage in the last couple of weeks. HTS, who goes by a million different names, has moved in with a small band, they say, of 850 men, and pushed out 40,000 of Assad's men. And of course, that was because Israel had hit Hezbollah hard. And now this guy, HTS, has come in and he showed himself to be brutal, absolutely brutal. And I believe he is somebody to watch very closely in the days ahead. We saw evil unmasked in Syria in recent days. HTS claiming to be a moderate, trying to negotiate with everybody, saying, hey, we're turning a corner, we're moving in a different direction. I didn't really want my men to do that, but oh well, they did. Well, HTS has a history of blood and murder, and he is a violent jihadist, and his connections are Al-Qaeda, ISIS. That's his blood, that's his roots. And he's now emerging in Syria, and he is somebody to watch very, very closely in the days ahead. I want to move now to the next section, and we're going to be hearing from Tom Hughes, who's going to be talking about the history of this section and how there are little pockets of evil that have been really simmering for like millenniums. And let's hear what Tom Hughes has to say. It's very powerful and very interesting.
To the
Crazy
point,
stuff.
let me ask you this. Like, you go into Syria. I mean, I have a lot to say. It is, along with everything you mentioned, if you look at Gaza, that's an area that Israel was unfaithful, specifically the tribe of Dan. You have Judea and Samaria, who the world calls the West Bank, another area where God judged them both in the past with Assyria and Babylon. You have the Golan Heights, where Dan relocated. When Dan didn't want Gaza, they moved up north to the Golan Heights. And what are the four areas that Israel is still dealing with today, which speaks to your point? It's also interesting in Numbers chapter 33, where Moses is told by the Lord, or he tells the people, when you cross the Jordan, this is what you must do. You must remove the inhabitants. He didn't say slaughter them all at that point. He says, he's not talking about Amalek specifically there, but he says, you must remove the inhabitants of the land everywhere I give to you. And then he says this in chapter 33, verse 55, he says, but if you do not drive out the inhabitants of the land from before you, then it shall be that those whom you let remain shall be irritants in your eyes and thorns in your sides, and they shall harass you in the land where you dwell. Moreover, it shall be that I will do to you as I thought to do to them. I guess, and you look at just with all the things that you're putting together, it's like God is saying, look, here we are. I mean, because this goes back 3,000 years, even further. God, which is another reason for me to believe the proximity of the days that we live into the last days is that It's like God saying, okay, we're going to deal with this again. We're dealing with it in the same areas. And then you can even throw Syria in there, because fascinating things have developed in Syria over the last week or two also. So and all of it is like, definitely you can't make this stuff up.
And truly, we do live in incredible times. And Tom Hughes just kind of walked you through some of the events in the Middle East throughout history and these pockets of evil that have been left. And in Numbers, it says, if you don't drive out those inhabitants, then they will plague you. And God himself will deal with Israel. And he's going to. This is a sad reality of where we live. Right now, I would say we're probably on the verge of Israel maintaining probably some strong control over Gaza, probably hit Iran hard and neutralize them. Probably will get some concessions out of HTS and Syria. My guess is that the world will come down hard on Israel, and they will probably be looking for a way to make peace. And there is no way that Israel has even the ability to push back all the evil in the world. There's only one person that can push that back, and that's going to happen with Jesus when he gets on the white horse in Revelation 19 and comes at the Battle of Armageddon and subdues all his enemies. Right now, Israel is in the middle of a fight for their life, and they will prevail in the short run. But soon we are going to be entering into a season where the writers of the book of Revelation, the four horsemen of the apocalypse, they're going to be writing. And it's going to culminate at the midpoint with an abomination of desolation. And there are key people, I think, to watch right now. But as events unfold, we'll get increasing clarity of where this is all moving. So the bottom line is, how do we deal with all this evil and where is it going? Ultimately, we push back and we do what we can, and we support those who push back against evil, support those leaders, pray for them. We have opportunity now, and we're coming into a season of darkness where the gospel is going to be incredibly bright. But we put our hope only in Jesus Christ. He's the only answer for the days ahead, and He is coming, and it's on the near horizon, so we can glory in that. Even as we go through the valley of the shadow of death, we can glory in that. This is what's coming in the days ahead. And so we'll see you next time.